Talking about our own passing is a difficult conversation. Talking about money we have to leave to the IRS may be even more scary. Here on Halloween this week, we're going to break down what the death tax, future potential, things you need to consider are today. Consider this program right now. Good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I'm your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Daren Hardesty.
Happy to have you along. Daren is one of our senior advisors out of the Anderson, Fishers, Lafayette every now and then, and Brownsburg office. Happy to have you around. We're all nomads. I try not to be as nomadic as I once were. I would leave and go to Lafayette on a Monday and come home on a Thursday night for about 20 years. So I'm glad to stay in Anderson more when I possibly can. But we are going to talk about the death tax. Death breaks down into two things when you look at it. When people say that word, they talk about inheritance tax, which is typically done at the state level. Indiana has no inheritance tax. More and more states are going away from it, which is a good thing. And then you have the federal estate tax. So, Daren, I'm going to let you, since this is your conversation, break it down, and we'll wind up with the IRA death tax.
Sure. So, essentially, when you pass, if you have a certain amount of money, assets, whatever it may be, inside of your estate, you are subject to an estate tax. Now, the good news is that under the current rules, most people, the vast majority of Americans, don't have to currently worry about it. The bad news is that we don't know if that's going to change. We don't know what the future holds. And so planning for this type of situation can be very difficult, especially if you're a family that you have significant amount of assets, and as of today, you don't have to worry about it. But if it was 10 years ago, you definitely would have had to worry about it. So everybody, go ahead, Joe.
I'm just going to ask you what's in my estate.
Your house, all of your investments, cash at the bank, vehicles, anything that is titled under your name is inside of your estate.
It's my IRA.
It depends on how the IRA is. No, sorry, it is not.
It's always.
Okay, so it's always, but
always. My
okay.
401k, always. The easiest way to understand what is in your estate is it's every right and option that you have to.
So I'm going to challenge you then, your beneficiaries on the IRA, if it is your spouse or somebody that's outside of your estate, is it technically in your estate when you pass?
Yep.
Okay.
As is life insurance.
Okay.
That's why you write irrevocable life insurance trusts.
Gotcha.
To try to remove it out of the estate.
Okay.
All right. So when we get to the IRA death trap,
yeah.
I will bring this back up, but keep going.
Okay.
You're doing well. And keep in mind, guys, I want to tell you, the number of people who understand estate tax like Daren already does is just shocking to me. I mean, this stuff is confusing. It is complex because it involves a tax code. It involves investment planning. And so do not get caught up in the news headlines of this is what could happen and all the fear and drama that goes along with it.
Right.
But the reason I agreed to do this segment was to show you what can happen.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, and just so everybody understands, this number, the amount that you can have inside of your estate that is not taxable, has been very small at one point, which means in the past it was, and Joe knows these numbers much better than I do, but it was $500,000.
Reagan made it $600,000 in 1986.
So a lot of people were exposed to that. And today, a whole lot more people will be exposed. But as time has gone on, each administration has typically raised the amount that is called as part of your unified credit or your exemption equivalent that you're allowed to have. And it currently, after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was passed at the end of 2017, the amount started at about $11.5 million, and as of today, for 2021, it's about $11.7 million per person that is excluded from the estate tax. So, like I said earlier, there's really not many people that have to really worry about this today. Because if you're a married couple, your estate is combined, it's over $23 million. We know some people, and many of you probably know people that may be exposed to that, but as of right now, most people aren't. So you may hear people in conversation where you go in and talk to an advisor or talk to your CPA and say, should I be worried about estate taxes? And a lot of them are going to say, based off today's rules, they're just going to look at you and say, no, you don't have to worry about any of that. And we disagree. I think it's always something we need to be paying attention to. If the current tax code that we are under right now sunsets at the end of 2025, we know that exemption equivalent will most likely get bumped back to where it was prior to the law being passed, which they might put in inflation adjustments. So it might be somewhere between $5 to $7 million per person, which is still a significant amount of money. But we don't know what is going to happen in the future. We need to make decisions on what's going to happen today. So everybody a lot of times comes into us and says, how much can I give every year not to worry about taxes? Well, that's different than the exemption equivalent. So every year you're allowed to give $15,000 to any individual as long as there's no strings attached. Can't give somebody $15,000 to go and say, hey, you have to go pay down debt or you have to do this. It has to truly be a gift. Everybody can give $15,000 per individual. So if my wife and I wanted to give Joe and Barb a gift, we could each give them $15,000 each, totaling $60,000 that we could give without having to worry about reporting on the taxes. If inside of 1 year I give more than that, that's where we have to start making sure that we start subtracting from your exemption equivalent. So that $11.7 million, anything above that $60,000 that my wife and I give to Joe and Barb will have to be subtracted from whatever that amount is at that time. So let's say we want to give them $100,000. Quick math, $40,000 have to be subtracted from my $11.7 million that I'm allowed to give in my lifetime. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of complications. We've seen multiple meetings where we have a family in Lafayette who wants to give a business to one of the kids in the family. In order to do that tax efficiently, we had to get a valuation for that business, subtract that value of the business from their exemption equivalent value to make sure that we're giving as much as we can from that exemption equivalent prior to them passing. So kind of a quick rundown there, but in a lot of moving parts. But Joe, if there's any follow-up questions to that, because there's plenty more to talk about.
So tell me what portability is and why it mattered.
So portability did not always exist. The Obama administration actually put this in force. Prior to portability, if I, as an individual, I only had my exemption equivalent, and for me to take advantage of mine and my spouse's exemption equivalent, we had to set up through estate planning. Typically, it was set up to have two different trusts.
2,000 hours of my life I logged in classrooms figuring out how to divide yours and Morgan's assets into two things. Mm-hmm. And in one fell swoop, 2,000 hours became worthless.
Yeah. It's a wonderful thing. Not that you had to do that, but
I'm all in favor of it, but that was just a painful day.
Sure. Well, and what's great is that it's not great, but what we see is a lot of people that come in, and it goes to a theme that we understand is that things change. The rules are going to change. We don't know what's going to happen in 10 years, 5 years, let alone 20 years. So people come into us that have established trust where they set up a trust for both themselves or them and their spouse. And they say, well, my attorney said I had to do this. And it's like, well, at that time, 20 years ago, your attorney was right. That this was the right move. Today, it's not as necessary because portability through a form 706 that you can file when your spouse passes, you can actually take anything that your spouse has not already used of their exemption equivalent and add it to yours. So if neither one of you used any of that during life, essentially you're able to take that $11.7 million, add it to your estate exemption equivalent so that if your estate for whatever reason was above that amount when you passed, your kids didn't have to worry about it.
But you do have to file the 706.
Yes.
And there are CPA firms which just shock me. If they'll say, well, they don't have a taxable estate, so I'm not filing it. It's $250 usually to file one if there's nothing taxable. Mm-hmm. I would strongly encourage you to file it.
Yeah.
We don't know what the future holds, as Daren said, and so you want to make sure that you have that taken care of.
Yeah, and we've got multiple families, and Joe, your example is always there's going to come a time if, let's say, somebody has a $3 million estate today. Let's say they win the lottery, some major event happens where all of a sudden where today they don't have an estate tax issue, they're going to hit the lottery, and all of a sudden if we didn't file that 706, now we're exposing them because of some great thing that happened. Now all of a sudden their estate definitely does have estate tax issues. And so the 706 is just a great backup to have. And it also, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but it will lock into this, like the current exemption equivalent. So as of the rules today, if you get your 706 filed, let's say your spouse passes earlier in the year, you get the 706 filed, you lock in the $11.7 million rather than waiting for whatever it may be down the road.
You lock it in for the deceased spouse.
But
only if you file the 706.
Right. So it just makes a lot of sense. And like Joe said, there are really smart people that are going to look at it and say, well, that's not an issue today, but it goes back to our fiduciary focus. It's not just taxes today, but taxes tomorrow. And we would much rather be planning ahead for something that could happen rather than just waiting and letting life happen to us.
And it goes back to the financial journey that we always talk about. People make the mistake of thinking that, it's just 1 year. People will retire and say, how should I change my investments now that I've retired? Or what should I do with my estate plan now that I've retired? Well, you still have another 20 to 30 years of life left, in most cases that are out there that we have to be able to deal with. You need to be looking at this stuff all the time. I don't have time to break down the IRA death trap for you.
Okay.
But it is an important part of understanding this. And as you look at Halloween and things that can really, really go wrong, what you will find are there people who have very large, and you've seen this, very large taxable estates that are all tax deferred, right? So if that estate tax would go back down to $3 million or $3.5 million, we have some people who would have to use IRA money to be able to pay the estate tax. And so when you get to your legacy planning and in your CFP studies, and you start hearing these words about gross and net estate, and you find out when you've got to take money out of an IRA to pay taxes, and now you have to pay taxes on the money you pulled out of the IRA to pay the taxes, and you keep doing this and going back. And I think Ed Slott showed us a slide. Seems like it was probably 2006 or 2007. I've lost just in the technology world, but it was like 60% shrinkage for one of his clients in New York City. Yeah, that was at the higher tax bracket and above the estate tax and didn't have liquidity, owned buildings, right, and had to pull the money out of the IRA, and it was just very, very sad. So IRA death trap is that. Folks, if you want to know more, go to yourlifeafterwork.com. Get signed up for a Next Steps meeting. We'll give you 90 minutes where we'll give you things to consider today, things you're going to want to consider in the future, and if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you, and we'll put it into writing. It's not right for everyone. We'll give you our time to sit down. You bring in your stuff, your tax return, your information. We will show you things you really need to consider about the conversation that we just had today. yourlifeafterwork.com, 800-928-4001.